Kicking off, though, our first speaker has taught more people to lead the creative process than anyone else in the world. He is the senior faculty member at the International Center for Studies in Creativity here at SUNY Buffalo State. He is the co-director of the I4 Studio, Buffalo's Idea Lab, located at the Innovation Center on the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, and is the author and co-author of 5 books. Fun fact about him, when he is not engrossed in teaching or facilitating, he quite literally herds cattle. Please welcome Dr. Roger Fierstein.
Morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Wow, wasn't that a party last night, huh? Did you have a good time? Yeah. All right. Little music this morning? Yeah. Why not? Yeah. I fell in love with creativity in 1977. In 1974, I started college as a music major at the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, Colorado. And to help pay for college, I taught guitar lessons. Let's do this together, right? You guys do the, ready? There we go, good. And one of the things that I found is my beginning students were getting bored with their lessons. And so I thought if I could get them to maybe get more creative, they'd enjoy their guitar lessons more. So I started reading books on creativity. I read this wonderful book called The Courage to Create. I read a really interesting book called Applied Imagination. I read Conceptual Blockbusting. And I read this really cool book called Experiences in Visual Thinking. And as I was reading through the books and I was looking through the bibliographies in the back of the books, I found that there were 2 names and one place that kept coming up consistently in the literature. And those 2 names were Sidney Parnes and Ruth Knoller, and this place called the Interdisciplinary Center for Creative Studies at this place called the State University College at Buffalo. So in April of 1977, I was living at my parents' house on our farm in Colorado, and my room was down in the basement. I got up the courage to call the center. And so I dialed the center, okay, from the basement phone, all right? And I got the secretary, Jenny, on the phone. And I explained to her my interest in creativity. And Jenny said, well, Dr. Parnes is here. Would you like to talk to him? Now, I'm 21 years old, okay? I never knew an author that was alive, all right? All the authors that I knew were dead, okay? And I'm going to talk to this creativity rock star, Sid Parnes, all right? Well, Sid gets on the phone. We have this wonderful conversation. He tells me about this thing called the Creative Problem Solving Institute, CPS. And then he tells me about this brand new master's degree program in creative studies. When I got done with the phone, I was so excited, I was shaking. I hung up the phone. I ran up the stairs and I said to my mom, Mom, I just talked to Sid Parnes in Buffalo, New York. Do you know what she said? She said, what? You made a long distance phone call? Calls were pretty expensive in 1977 from rural Colorado. Right? So in 1977, I came out to the 24th Annual Creative Problem Solving Institute, and I took a 3-week course. And here's my notes from the Institute and that course. Right? I went back to Colorado. I finished up my master's degree. And my mom said, Roger, when you got off the plane, all you could do was talk about creativity and Buffalo. She said, we couldn't get you to stop talking about that stuff. And so I was accepted into the master's degree program in January of 1979, although at the time I understand that Sid was a little reluctant to accept me into the program because I was so young. In June of 1978, I packed up my 1973 Ford Maverick with my guitar, and I drove across the country by myself. I was 22 years old. And I remember telling my mom as I was leaving, I said, Mom, I don't know if I'm ever going to make any money doing this, but I sure do love it. So I came out and I got my master's degree in 1979, and I believe I was the 7th person to get that degree. And in addition, and this is what the process looked like back in 1979. Let me show you that a little bit. You had these 5 steps of the process. You had fact finding, FF, problem finding, PF, solution, idea finding, SF, solution finding, and acceptance finding. And you had these diamonds, the diverging and the converging. Well, in addition to studying creative problem solving, we studied things like synectics, 2 versions of synectics. We studied creative analysis, okay? We studied general semantics. And Synectics Incorporated had this really expensive open registration program that they held in Boston. And in August of 1981, my friend Bill Shepard and I saved our money. We drove to Boston and we took this course. This course absolutely blew us away, all right? We came out of that 3 days, we were just incredibly on fire. And one of the things that was so cool about this course was this creative problem-solving sequenced flowchart. I loved this thing. It was so clean. Look at it. You've got what's a brief history here. You've seen some things here. What are the pluses of the idea? What are the concerns about the idea? It told you what to do. It was clean. It told you what to do on every step of the process. It was so wonderfully prescriptive, and I love that, right? Now, as I was going over my notes for this presentation, and as I found my notebook, I had the notebook, I was digging through the back of the notebook, and I came across a legal pad that I sketched in August of 1981 that I think is really the genesis point or the nexus point for the creative process as we know it today. You want to see it? It's right here? Yeah. Okay, all right. I put it up there too. Here it is, okay? So here it is. And so if you take a look at this, this is where I blended creative problem solving and synectics. So springboards became problem finding. Itemized response became solution finding. Well, also in 1981, my two friends, Bill Shepard and I, who I went to synectics with, and my friend and colleague, Diane Fukarsaki, we started a consulting company. The consulting company is called Multiple Resource Associates. Now, to survive, we had to innovate. We had to evolve the process. So in 1981 and 1982, there was a whole bunch of inventions that came along in the process. The Client Facilitator Resource Group was developed. That whole model got developed. The idea of the process buddy was invented. Pluses and potentials and concerns was invented. And highlighting was invented. Let me tell you about pluses and potentials and concerns and highlighting. One of the things that happened with the earlier process is that when you got done generating ideas, those ideas always got mashed into a matrix. Now, a matrix is a really cool tool, but it stands alone and it takes some time. So as we were going through the process, we'd have all these ideas, all this energy, we'd put them into a matrix, the process would bog down. And one day we were experimenting with this technique, this itemized response technique from synectics. And Diane said, why don't we put something between the good stuff, the pluses, and the bad stuff, like a potential or a potential direction or something like that. Hence, pluses and potentials and concerns was born. One day we were working with a client, and by the way, this is before Post-its were invented, okay? So we're writing these ideas down on a flip chart. And I turned to the client and I said, okay, we've got all these ideas here, pick the best one. And I had this deer in the headlight look from the client. The client didn't know what to do because there are lots of best ones. So we had to invent a tool to deal with that, all right? And the name of that tool was called HRHP, all right? And here's how it works. Once you have all these ideas, you mark the hits, okay? Then you take the numbers of the hits, you form them together into a hotspot, and then you rephrase and paraphrase the hotspot, right? When Diane said, let's call it highlighting, we went with that. We liked it a lot better. In 1984, Sid Parnes retired, and I was fortunate enough to get his position here at the university. One of the things that I've always done is I've always shared the innovations that I've learned in business with my students. So in 1984, if you were to take a class with me, this is what the process looked like. And you can see there's some blending going on from this work here. You can see some prescriptive sorts of things happening. You can see a blend, a bifurcation here between pluses and potentials and concerns and criteria. In the mid-1990s, we were having some problems with language. And people said, well, what's the difference between idea finding and solution finding? Or didn't we just do that? And so one day in the mid-1990s, Bill Shepard, Jonathan VR, Hedria Luntkin, Blair Miller, and I sat around my living room, and we invented the plain language model of creative problem solving. Some of you might be familiar with this. Now, plain language isn't a really sexy name for a model, but what plain language did was make the model, the process, accessible to everyone. And that's what we were after. We were looking to make the process accessible. And to continue to make that accessible, Jonathan, Blair, and I wrote 2 books. This is the 2nd edition of Creativity Unbound and CPS Facilitation, that you guys are now on to the 5th edition with. And the process continued to evolve. 2005, the thinking skills model came out. Based on the research that Laura Swatowski did, Mary Mance, Gerard Puccio, Mary Murdoch introduced the thinking skills model. And the evolution continued. In 2010, foresight model. Take a look at that. 29 years. My goal in this business has been to make creativity simple, make it practical, and help people to apply their creativity in their world. A number of years ago, I was talking to a colleague of mine, and she was saying, Roger, you share all this stuff with your students. Aren't you afraid you're training your competitors? I said, I really don't see it that way, because I'm not training my competitors, I'm training my collaborators. And so my collaborators, let me just say this to you. Teach each other. Share what we've learned. Credit your sources, because we stand on the shoulders of giants. Do no harm, because I taught you, and 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 all of you have taught me. Thank you.